Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our adoption webinar hosted by Lifetime Adoption. My name is Kim King and I am co-hosting with Libby Dennison, and our wonderful guest speaker for tonight is Mardie Caldwell, who will be presenting Bonding and Attachment After Adoption. We appreciate you all for being with us and making time for us this evening as you seek to grow your knowledge, not only just about the adoption process, but also about bonding and attachment after the adoption. Just to cover a few details, if you do have any questions that are not answered tonight, or you're not sure what your next step is in your adoption journey, please do reach out to us. We have a 24/7 hotline at 1-800-923-6784. That is 1-800-923-6784. You can always email in your questions to adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. That's adopt, ADOPT, at lifetimeadoption.com. And I encourage all families and birth parents to join us on Facebook, because that is just such a great community where we can keep the adoption conversation going and stay encouraged as well. That is online at facebook.com/open.adoption. So facebook.com/open.adoption. If you are brand new to Lifetime and haven't taken the first step with us, the first step is to complete your online application. It is a free, easy online application at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. lifetimeadoption.com/apply will take you directly to the start page, and you can easily just fill out the basic questions that we ask, and we will have a response for you within 1 to 5 business days. And you're always welcome to call or email to check in on things or add more information to your file. The number here again is 1-800-923-6784, and the email is adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. So with that, Libby, thank you so much for setting everything up for us this evening.
Great. Well, you're welcome, Kim. I'm glad to see everyone settling in. And I am happy to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Mardie Caldwell, who founded Lifetime Adoption 30 years ago now, which we can all hardly believe. But also, she is an adoptive mom, and a lot of her expertise comes from her personal journey to parenthood through adoption, where she realized some of the things she needed or wished she'd known, and she has spent the last 3 decades, probably even more, passing these things on to other adoptive parents so that they could benefit from the things that she learned, the things that she gained, and the things she created out of those needs from her own story. So Mardie, thank you for being here tonight to follow up since your last webinar when we got to talk more about great parenting tips for adoptive parents. But tonight we get to continue the discussion more and focus on bonding, which is kind of where we left off before. So I'm glad to have you back.
Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I love seeing all the questions coming in too, and that people have. And bonding is so very important. It's a topic that I really feel is something that people ask about, and sometimes they think about, but they don't ask about. And sometimes the bond I find with, I'm going to share stories, I'm going to share some techniques that I have found through my own adoption, but also that I've recommended to other people, and have found them to work really well. You know, the biggest thing I hear from adoptive parents a lot of times, if they're honest, they'll say, you might be able to bond to this baby, you know, if it's not from your body. And I remind them that your partner isn't from your body, and you love them and bonded to them, and to remind them that you know, you can do that, and it's different for every person. Sometimes the bond is immediate. People fall in love the instant they set their eyes on the little bundles of joy, or when they hear about the adoption, that they have been chosen, they start bonding immediately with this little human being they haven't even met or laid eyes on at all. But once they hear the birth mom speak, or they hear the news, they start bonding with that child. Other times, bonding may take longer, and studies have actually shown that 20% of new moms mothers feel no emotional attachment to their newborn and the hours after the birth or the placement. And this is really important because a lot of people feel guilty if they don't start bonding with their child right away. They feel like, what's wrong with me? And all those fears come up that, you know, was I meant to be a parent? Why am I not bonding? Why do I feel something? And this can take weeks or even months to feel an attachment. And if you haven't begun the bonding with your baby, don't feel anxious or guilty. It will come with time, but I'm going to share some things you can do to help with that bonding. But the main thing, I think that there's some fears that we have, and I know as an adoptive mom I had, was I wanted to know that that baby was mine, and that I wasn't, that time period between the finalization that the baby's there. There's sometimes a unspoken subconscious fear that something would happen and that you've opened yourself up to bonding and being with this baby. And I want to share with you that be aware of that, but don't let it hold you back from loving and giving the love and care and attention you need to this child, because if you've done everything right and it's all meant to be and everything's going well, it'll be fine. But we will have challenges, and these challenges we have during this period of time are very much like we'll have with the children growing up. They're going to have good days and days that aren't as good, and other challenges too. Bonding happens a lot of different ways, and I'm going to share some of those ways too. I'm going to talk about attachment parenting style, and these techniques are really important. I practice them, and I've recommended to people that I've helped, other adoptive parents that I've helped also with their bonding too. And I'll go back and forth between these because I think you hear them more than once. They'll kind of set into. The one technique that I really believe is important is skin-to-skin holding, interacting during feeding time, hands-on type of thing. And this is why I encourage parents to take off as much time as they possibly can to spend this time together as a family. And this is also when you first adopt and you receive your child. I may be speaking about newborns primarily, but the same thing can apply to a child, a toddler, that type of thing. And then we'll talk about older children if we have time today too. But that time that you have with ICPC, where you're in one state waiting to be, told you could go home to your home state, that's going to be really important that you take that time right then and start the bonding immediately. Because what happens is a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm stuck in this birth mom state. I want to go home. That's all I want to do. And they miss out on the opportunity they have to really spend time bonding with their baby and with their spouse and this new family. This is your new family. And building that time right there is really important. You are now building your new family. So I think the skin-to-skin contact is really important. And not having a lot of people around at the very beginning, I think, is important.
Mardie, I wanted to stop you because we actually had one of the first questions just said, can you talk about skin-to-skin contact? And I like that you're coupling it with the timing, sort of bringing in, well, should I go so far as to have skin-to-skin contact when I'm not even sure that this adoption's going through yet? And then also sometimes on the flip side are the other parents who wonder, what if I can't get there right away? Am I missing that opportunity? Or what if birth mom doesn't want me there right away? So can you maybe speak a little bit more, because even in your adoption, you weren't there for the first few weeks.
First 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, first 5 weeks we weren't at all. And then it was different than with my daughter. The skin-to-skin contact is really the kangaroo care. And they've used it a lot with premature babies. It calms babies down, but I found it worked wonderfully with my children. And what we recommend you do is skin-to-skin contact is where you leave the baby in its diaper and you take off your shirt and your spouse would too, and lay the baby on your chest so they have skin-to-skin contact with you. They can hear your heart beating, your voice soothing. And I recommend at that time, if you want to put on some soothing music, I usually recommend something like some classics, Beethoven, or you could put in something really soothing in there. There's a few other ones that are recommended for children. And I know I even do this with my granddaughter now, too. When she's trying to rest, I put in Baby Einstein lullabies, and very, very soothing for them, too. So those are good things. But you want that skin-to-skin contact. You also, at nighttime, I wore my nightgown for a few nights in a row, and I recommend this to adoptive moms. You want your scent of your body to become familiar to your baby, so that calms them down also. And they're used to hearing the voice of their birth mother for all those months. Now they've got to adjust to a new life. I mean, they're now on the outside, and they hear new voices. They have to adjust that. So you want to have soothing voices. You want to have eye contact with them. You want to hold them. You want to caress them. You want to do some baby massage. I would massage my children's back and their little legs and their feet, and talk to them and coo with them. Very important. And I wore my daughter, I learned this from a lady from Vietnam. I wore a sling that I wore till she was, gosh, it's a sling that you, and they have now all over, you can buy them, but when she was born, they didn't have these, so we had to make our own out of 10 yards of fabric and wrap it around us. And what we do is she would stay with me when I did my cooking, I did things around the house, and she would be right up against me. And dads can carry the babies now too, and that's really important for bonding. And I would carry her until her feet would kick my knees. That's how she was, I think, 2 years old, almost 2 years old when I finally took her off of that. But it really kept them very soothed and relaxed, and I thought that was important to this day. You know, she's still, at her age, she's 23, very, very soothing. She likes that, that touching, when I brush her hair and that type of thing, which is really important. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, so I hope that answered that question a little bit about that. For the one mom, I think Julia was asking about that. I think that's important, that you have that skin to skin, and that happens right away. And don't be fearful that, my gosh, is just going to go through. You can't hold yourself back from this child. That child's there helplessly waiting for you to bond with them and to spend time with them. And I think the first 3 months are the most important time in your child's life, and after birth or after placement, and that's really important. After birth is most important, but it's basically the 3 months that you have to spend time bonding with them, and that's why I encourage people not to go back to work too early and not to have too many caretakers. What happens is, if you're out of state and you're waiting to get your ICPC clearance to go back into your home state, that's the time you want to spend as much time bonding, because when you get home, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to want to come over and see the baby. And my recommendations and my rules are, no one holds the baby more than 5 minutes other than the spouse or maybe grandma. And the reason why is because it's going to be very confusing for a child to be held for longer than that period of time. And that's why for this first few weeks to a month or so, let that bonding really come with you, because otherwise they can get confused. And everyone wants to hold the baby. That's great. They can hold them for up to 5 minutes, and then back they go. So the baby knows the common denominator and the root home is with you guys, and that's really important. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. Mardie, when people are coming over to visit, oftentimes they want to help, and they want to help by holding the baby so you can do other things. But you hold the baby while they do the other things. Like, they could run the vacuum cleaner, and they could take out the trash, they could walk the dog, whatever it is, the dishes, things that are a little maybe trickier to do depending on your baby's schedule. Maybe they can pitch in by doing that and hold the baby for a few minutes. But I love that. And I learned through personal experience that, when you are there right up close with your baby as much as physically possible, that pays off in the end, not only through the bonding, but also to create a confident baby who turns into a confident toddler that always knows that their needs are always met. So I just observed that through my own parenting too, by wearing my daughter.
Wear the sling, the carrier, rock your baby on your lap, singing, never prop a bottle up, ever, ever, ever. Your voice and the touch can be very comforting to them. I would sing, and I don't have the greatest voice, but I would sing, and even my kids laugh now, because to my granddaughter I sing songs about, taking her bib off or doing things. I sing about everything I do. And we just make a rhyme out of it, and they like that, and they get used to that, and so make it fun. But the main thing too is that time you have is make that nap time your private time. A lot of times people want to get caught up in their text messaging, or they're checking their emails while the baby's laying there. I ask you not to do that, and I'll tell you why. This is going to be such a short period of time. We're all going to regret we didn't spend more time with our kids. There's not a parent on earth that will say that, but put it to a side for a little bit and just marvel at this child and tell them how much you love them and how wonderful they are and how God wonderfully made them and placed them in your home. and I think that's important. I found also we have the family bed, and during the early years when I was doing adoption work, I would have birth moms call, and they'd say, please come pick up my baby. I can't parent anymore, and I want to make an adoption plan. And at the time, we had been foster parents, but we weren't doing foster care, but we would actually bring these babies into our home, and we'd cuddle them because they would cry missing their birth mothers. So we had this big king-size bed, and I put the babies next to us until they fell asleep to put in their crib, and I cuddled with them. It's very, very important until their adoptive parents could come and get them, because I just couldn't imagine that baby being all alone. And I remember so many times little babies looking up from the cribs, those little big eyes and those big tears, you know, wanting to be held. And I thought, how can you say no to that child? So, and these kids are now much older, and, you know, I shared the story with their adoptive parents on how it was important to continue that bonding all along. Your baby needs to have you meet its basic needs, and it's more than you just changing its diaper and feeding it. And these don't change with high-tech methods. You know, this is old-fashioned stuff that we do that has worked for years, and we need to continue to do it. Lots of eye contact. The soothing music is extremely important. Like I mentioned, the same caretaker. And bonding is a lifelong process. You know, you want to catch up bonding as much as possible, encouraging other older children also to spend time with the children and talk to them. And if you have other children in the family, spend time cuddling with them too, because this is going to be different, because you're going to be giving all this attention to this new baby, and they may feel like you know, they're being left out. So you want to cuddle and coo with them, have eye contact, cut their little face in your hands, and tell them how much you love them and what a wonderful big brother or sister they're going to be. Extremely important. I want to tell you a story also. This is one. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, Mardie. I was just going to ask one of the questions that came up. Well, and you were talking about, you know, limiting the number of caretakers and spending as much time as you can. Sometimes, and we had actually one person ask tonight say, well, I'm a little worried about how quickly I'll have to get back to work, especially if I need to leave right away. I know I can have my maternity leave, but I may have sort of this bubble time where, okay, I left in a hurry, now I need to come catch up before I take my whole maternity leave. What tips might you have for how people could talk to their employers about emphasizing the need for, I need to just be gone. I don't know when this is going to happen, but I can't break that time that I have set to bond with my new baby once I adopt.
Right, and it's sometimes much easier if you have your employer as a parent already. And I hate to say this, but it's easier sometimes if it is a female that has other children too. But many times talking to them about bonding and just being kind but firm, and offering to do some work from home if needed. When if you're married, your spouse is there to be able to help out with the baby. You know, any way you can, but the bonding period of time, I think, has got to be paramount to you, because you'll never get that time back. And sharing a little bit about adoption, how it could happen last minute, and you're going to keep everything up. You know, you've got at work, you've got to keep everything updated, and all your projects on target, because it could happen at any time. And I don't want you to you know, should yourself if you can't, if you have to go back to work. Spend as much time as you can immediately coming back home, and spending time with the baby every minute. And you know, you may not be able to go to the gym. There's going to be things that you've done in the past you're going to have to work out. And sometimes what I would do is I would stand the baby in the little sling, and I would do my leg exercise, my arm exercises, whatever you could do to exercise, and you just adapt, but you always keep the baby at your focus in the center of your attention. But talking to your, I think there's some, Dave, the Wendy's Foundation has a booklet, I believe, on how to share at your employer's workplace adoption, and they talk about a lot of different things that you can do to help with that. And now they have also father's leave, you know, the paternity leave, which is really great. And I think some parents will actually have an overlap where they take off a few, like a few weeks to a month or so for one parent, and then they have the interim where they're together for time off. One parent goes back to work, the other one stays home, and then the other one goes back to work, one stays home, so they can equal out about 3 months of time off if possible. And now this can be a challenge, and some parents go, I can't afford to do that. Do whatever you possibly can right now. I've helped people get garage sales together and save money with that. But you can take that time off, because again, those early years, those early months, I should say, are really crucial. And they talk about the first 5 years, how important that is. I got to a point that I ended up working at home and doing work at home, and my son was brought up, basically, under my desk type of thing when I was working with his little blankie and playing, and hearing all about adoption and that type of thing. And I had people that came in and helped with house care and did other things for me. Another tip, if you're adopting twins, must have domestic help. You've got to have someone come in and clean your house, and someone that can help out with simple meals, because people that adopt twins, you've got to have lots of bonding time, and they have a higher incidence of divorce with twins, and the stress level is extremely high. You're not getting any sleep. You have no idea what it's going to be like, and so it can be a wonderful time, but also you've got to have a lot of planning done ahead of time and be very organized if you're going to consider twins. And be able to bond with both those babies and make that your priority too. So, and when I say priority, you can't neglect your relationship with your spouse. Really important. Your date night might be in the living room floor with the blanket out there, and and have a simple sandwich or something together. But remember to tell each other you love each other, and remember the reasons that you came together and you first cared for each other and loved each other. Because what happens is we get so tied up in parenting that sometimes we forget that with our spouse. And this is an exciting time. You'll get into a few months into your parenting, and you'll forget what life was like before the baby. And don't you find that true, Kim? It just like
yes.
It just, I can't imagine what it was like before then, before the kids were there. And you'll find that too. If you don't find that you're bonding right away with your baby, take more time with it. Ask yourself questions as if you were fearful about the adoption, the finalization, that type of thing. If you have anything that may be preventing you, some people have a hard time with parenting because they may have had a difficult childhood themselves and were not nurtured themselves. And I've seen this too, where people didn't have a nurturing parent, so they didn't have an example of what to do. This is when you need webinars like this, or people that can be role models for you on how to care for the baby and how to really hold the baby and be there. And they're really simple needs that children have, that babies have. They just want to know. And this is another thing. When you're adopting a baby, especially if the child's a toddler or older, I don't recommend it, and specialists don't recommend that you let the baby cry more than a few minutes. And that goes against what other doctors say. But for adoptive children, they need to know, like Kim was talking about, that you're going to be there for them. It's safe, they're okay, and you're going to be there for them. So we don't let the baby just cry itself to sleep at the very beginning. I think it's really sad, because they're still trying to figure out where's my mom, where's my birth mother, where am I at? Things smell different, they look different, I feel different, I've got different clothes on, there are different diapers on me, the food's different, the milk's different, maybe the climate is, and all these changes that an adult would have a difficult time with. We've got this baby, and the worst thing you can do is let that baby cry itself and wonder, and all you're doing is embedding in that child these horrible imprints, and this is for adopted children primarily, that they're not safe and they're not going to be taken care of. Really, really important too.
I couldn't agree more.
Mardie, I actually read a really interesting piece about that recently, and it was actually talking about the different phases that an infant, whether they were adopted or born into the family biologically, that they go through, up to a certain age. I mean, probably lots of people have seen those children that know how to work their parents by crying all the time. But when we're talking about infancy, that it was talking about how much stress it actually puts on the child when they think no one's responding to their one means of communication, that they actually go into kind of a shock, and that sometimes that's what will put them to sleep, but that it came out of great stress.
Yeah. And a lot of times it'll cause them not to attach at all. Sometimes the mother or father's, like your situation, can affect the relationship with the new baby. Any of these items here I'm going to share with you can affect bonding and need to be addressed now. Maybe you have a child who lacked a positive parental role, or maybe you've had some depression in your life. that could affect it also. Maybe a pregnancy loss or a loss of a child. For me, I had 7 pregnancy losses, so when I finally had this child in my arms, I thought, am I deserving of this child? Maybe I wasn't meant to be a parent. But God kept confirming, this is a child for you, and I want you to be a mommy, and here's the way I'm going to make it happen. Then also people that don't have a social network of other people they can turn to and be part of, so that you don't get into that isolation type thing. And this life stresses, such as maybe a difficult job, maybe your employer did give you a hard time about taking time off, or you're unemployed, or you're having financial difficulties because adoption is expensive too, or there might be marital problems that you need to address early on and work. All those stresses can actually affect some of your bonding with your baby. But I encourage you to, I call it fake it till you make it, which means holding your baby, cooing with your baby, spending time, and doing all the things that you know that are right with it. Children need to grow up knowing that they are wanted, loved, and that you were thrilled to be able to adopt them. This is important. My son, when he was in kindergarten, it was so funny. The teacher called me and said, could you come in after school today and talk to you? I thought, oh man, what did he do now? And she said that he had all the kids in tears. And some of you heard the story before. He had the children in tears because he had told them he was chosen and they weren't. And their parents had no choice. And so I said, I'll have a talk with him. So I had to share with him that, they're very much loved too, and just because you're chosen doesn't mean that their parents didn't want them. So they kind of overdid that part of it. But, that was something too, is that you always want to reassure them often that you have chosen them, and this is important. One of the things you can do too is start bonding with them, which will actually help you later on, is to start a memory book. And share this memory book with them to cuddle time. I made mine up at the time because we weren't really wealthy. I made our own little book up, and I would cuddle with them and take little naps and show them the pictures we had there, and I cut things out of magazines and taught them what pictures were which, but I celebrated this memory book with their chosen days, and they had pictures of their milestones, and we have what we call a chosen day. Is the day that we celebrate the day they came to your home, and that's different than their birthday, or your finalization day, the adoption day, where you gotcha day. Those chosen days are really important, and we would celebrate by going out to eat, and it used to be McDonald's when the kids were little, and then it got to be the steakhouse when my son was older, and where he wanted to celebrate his chosen day. But start a memory book early ahead of time, and I also picked up newspapers the day the baby was born and the city they were born into, which I thought was really important too, to have that. Those are areas that you can show the child later on that how much you did care about them, and we're able to go and do that too. Other questions that might have come in? I know I'm giving a lot of information at one time.
Well, there was a question, I think you touched on it more, but if you just want to clarify, it was a really great question that said, so how do you explain to your family and friends why you're only allowing them 5 minutes at a time with baby?
Yeah, I think what you do is you basically tell them that you have found, you've learned, that studies show that time, that bonding the baby is, and explain to them in a loving way, the baby needs to be able to bond now, and these first few months are really important, especially with the adopted child. So we're going to have, that we would really like to keep the holding time down to a short period of time, then back to the parent, and then you can hold the baby again. You're going to have some people that are going to roll their eyes, and they're going to think that you're, crazy, and that's okay. But just share with them that, you want to be able to have that time. And if you think about it, 5 minutes is a long time to hold a baby. Some people want to do longer, but 5 minutes, and that gives you time to go potty or get something to eat or something like that, and just come back and just say, let me go ahead and reconnect with the baby now, and then for a little bit too. And it may seem like, you may sound like a little alien for a while. It's really okay, and it won't matter in probably 30 days or less than that. But your baby, it will show up in your baby. And there's more and more research being done on this too, but your baby is going from one environment to another, not hearing the voice of their birth mother, and really trying to get connected with you. And if they have all these voices confusing them all over, it's going to be really hard for them. It's very, very different than a child that has had the same voice from for 9 months. And especially if you're adopting a toddler. A toddler wants to know that you're there, the common denominator is there, and that's why it's important to spend that time with the toddler as much as possible so they know that they can come to you, and when they look up for, where do I get my comfort, and looking at you in your eyes, you're always going to be there for them. And don't feel like you're spoiling the children. You're not. This is completely different. Bonding is different with adopted children than it is with biological children. And just remember to continue to include your other children, if you have other children, into this whole bonding situation where they can be there with you and they can cuddle too. And even take a day off of school, as a special family day that you can do that. And but we had our family bed, which was really important. And we had dinner time, we ate together, we turned off the TV set and ate together. And let me share a story I did with one of my son too. Boys are different sometimes than girls in communicating, and I found this with my son even to this day. As a man, when I really want to communicate with him, a lot of times I do parallel work with him. And so we would go outside and do weeding or whatever, and he would just open up and talk to me, rather than sitting down and crossing the table and say, okay, I want to talk to you about such and such. It just didn't work as well. And I found that with kids also, if you go out and you play and you're playing with them, they'll open up and talk to you more too. And doing fun things and just sitting down and having a meeting type of thing. So I think that's really important. There is what I did with my son.
Before I wanted to, because you had touched on something, and we had a great question because of the handout that we have tonight. One of the notes that you included in there just talked about recognize that even a baby will grieve. And so while you're talking about, this bonding and recognizing voices and not having the benefit of the 9 months in utero to know the sounds of the person who is potentially going to raise them in adoption, how, I would bet most people could relate to how even a 1-year-old could grieve the change once they're adopted. But what do you mean by even a baby grieves?
A baby will grieve the familiarity they have with the birth mother, with her voice, hearing that in utero for 9 months. And that familiarity, which they have become to know, and they're going to be searching for it. So sometimes they'll actually see a baby looking around, and babies grieve. They've found that sometimes people say about their adoptive baby, they'll say, such a good baby, sleeps through the night. A lot of times these babies are going through withdrawals. And they're almost as like a baby, an infant depression type thing. That's why it's important to hold them and love and talk to them and soothe with them and spend that time, because a lot of times they're quiet because they're going through all this emotional stuff. And there's a lot of work you can find online about this too. So, the babies don't necessarily just scream and holler, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're having a terrible time. Sometimes the quiet ones too are still needing as just much comfort as possible. I like napping with my babies, and I like putting them on my chest and taking a nap with them. I thought that was really important, and being there, and then with the baby monitors, if you had to leave, come back in right away. But extremely important for that. Even to this day, when we've got 6 grandchildren. When they come over, we make nests on the floor so they can all sleep on the floor next to Grandma and Grandpa. And they know we're right there, and the little ones, if they wake up at nighttime, we're right there for them. And they've got the little teddy bears, and we're all in our little room like they did 200 years ago. We're all in our little tent together. And that bonding is really important. So I think, spending time learning about babies ahead of time and doing the research now is going to really help you on what babies feel and how they bond.
And that's probably a practical tip too, because it may not feel very appropriate to do skin to skin with like a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old in the same way you would with an infant. But I could imagine having, the big kind of slumber party experience where we're all sleeping together, we're all spending a lot of cozy, close time together. Would that be a good tip for people who bring home a toddler, let's say?
Oh, I think so too, and I think if you have older children, to help them bond with that child too is make it very special for them. And if the baby comes home, have a special stuffed animal that you can give the other child to, and make it just as special that this is wonderful and you can be a big brother or big sister. And I did that with my son when 5 years later his sister came along, and he just absolutely loved and cuddled with her. And I said, "I'm so excited, in a couple of days the baby's going to be here," and and spending that time together, and we would all nap together and get excited, and that's a good age when they can go get a diaper for you, and really help out and continually praise them for their health and what a big help they're going to be, and get lots of pictures and things like that. But I think sharing with that, also sharing about, as we get into older children, we can, if we have time, we'll talk about this, about sharing your child's adoption story if people are interested in that too. I think, adopted children need to have some privacy also about their story. The story I do share is, I just shared this just recently. Again, when my son was about 4.5, 5, I used to have the media would contact me a lot about adoption and want to do interviews with me and have me on television. I was on about at least once a month. And they had contacted me and said they really want to interview my son. And I said, well, I need to ask him that. And they were kind of taken back by that. And so I remember putting the phone down and going out to ask him. I said, honey, the news people want to come out and talk to you about adoption. Would you like to do that? And he was playing, and he looked up and he said, Mom, quite frankly, I don't want to. And I said, okay. So I went back and I said, I'm sorry, but he doesn't want to be interviewed, and I have to respect that, And so it was one of those things that I had to respect his privacy. And people are going to ask about adoption. The one thing I want to recommend too for people is don't share much about your birth parents to other people in your family. And this is their story, and I've heard more horror stories of sharing some type of information about the child that goes through a cousin. You tell your sister, and then she's telling her husband, and then the nieces and nephews hear about this, and later on it comes back to the children about that. And also, if there's been any drug use or anything, as soon as you start saying that, and the baby throws a 2-year-old fit, grandma's going to point over there to, that's the drugs right there from the birth mother, and it may have nothing to do with that at all. It may be just a normal thing the child's going through. So just remember that that's their story too. And there's some things I want to talk about here too, where with oral children, when share age-appropriate information with them, create an environment, when the baby's little, you want to create an environment that's not too stimulating. That's why I talked about not having a lot of people. Keep your world very small until their neurology settles down. And then as they get older too, you don't want to have them so excited all the time. Our family is a big Portuguese family, and we talk and we all speak loud, and everyone's raising their hands and going on about stuff, and everyone's in everyone else's business. But when it comes to adoption, we really keep this really private, because it's something that you can share, that we don't talk about that, or this is really private, so we don't share about the birth parents, or this is the best. They chose adoption because they love their child. It's really important that you don't share anything about them, if they would later come up and say, Mom, that was me. Because my son, when he was older and he was in his teenage years, at school, he didn't want to have his friends know that he was adopted. He just didn't want to be set aside. He didn't want to be put aside. And today he works in the company, but I don't bring it up unless he wants to bring it up. But it's very important. If you have an older child that you're adopting also, some of the areas you might want to look at to explore, and that the children are having problems with it, are sleeping problems. You'll see they're neglecting themselves. They have a food hoarding. They're lacking eye contact. Something like that. You want to look at that and get some help. Don't be afraid to ask for help for that. That's extremely important too. We were talking a little bit about earlier, you were talking about bonding with an older child. I hope I answered that question for someone was asking about that. If you have an older child, how to bond with an older child. And what I did, the story I want to share with you is I would be cooking, and I had my son learn to cook with me. So I wanted him to learn to cook and sew and everything. I said, I've always told him this, I want you to marry somebody because you love them, not because you need someone to take care of you. So he knows how to sew, he knows how to cook, he knows how to fix things, repair things, and work on cars and stuff. But he's a really good chef. And But what I did was, when I wanted to spend some time bonding with him as he was getting a little bit older, I would cook like my spaghetti sauce. And I said, come here and taste this and see what you think. And I would cup my left hand, I'm right-handed, I'd cup it under my right hand with some sauce. I'd blow on it to cool it off, and I'd lift it to his mouth and let him taste it. What happened was it was spoon-to-mouth contact on that was actually bonding, and it was communication.
Mm.
Very, very important. So that spoon-to-mouth type of thing, let me taste this. It's very intimate. If you do that with your spouse too, here, taste this here, you're actually feeding them. For an older child or a child that you've adopted that's older, this is real important. You're not feeding them as far as the whole nurture. Even my granddaughter, and she's not even 2 yet, when I try to feed her, she'll say no, and she'll take the spoon and try to feed herself with food all over the place. But it's the way you nurture, just occasionally doing this tasting type thing, and looking them in the eye, which is really important too. You're going to have situations that you want to become aware of also, in case there's any situations that come up with autism, or eye contact, or children that have a hard time bonding. You want to get care as soon as possible. Look into that and have evaluations done, because that's really important. That the sooner you get care for special needs or anything that pops up, the better you are than putting it off. Yeah. Any other questions too?
Yes, Marty, there was a question that came in about which parent, like, they're planning to take, the adoptive mom is planning to take several weeks off, and then when she goes back to work, her husband's going to stay home, be able to stay home for a little while with the baby. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Does it matter which parent?
Oh, yeah. No, I think it's important, but at the very beginning, you will both want to trade off so that they get used to both just not mom taking care of the baby, it's dad also, because they become familiar, because as a caretaker, if dad has not been participating in that bonding type thing, then when mom leaves, it could be any caretaker. So it's really important that they trade off during that period of time. And I wouldn't put my kids in real quiet rooms. Because our family is kind of loud and everything. I would put the baby on my chest to sleep, and I would let the noise go and music or whatever it may be, so they got used to being able to sleep through any type of environment they had. But I would say let your spouse spend some time also taking naps, which is not a hard thing to have them do, with the baby, and skin to skin. And this is it's a homework assignment that you need to do, and planning on this in advance, I think, is really important. And I just love it when I talk to families and they get this when I mention the time with the ICPC, because you could be there for 3 days to a week and a half in another state, in one of the extended stays. They have the little kitchenettes and things like that. Do your cooking right there. Don't take the baby out to restaurants. Have stuff delivered. Have pizza delivered. Have something delivered that way. Go down to the deli. But spend as much time as you can with the baby, away from a lot of other people at that time. Now, this changes now when you're at home with your child. If you're taking time off, you don't want to be isolated also. You want to have mommy days off or daddy days off, with groups, play groups, and other people that you can have other children around your children too. But at the very beginning, that bonding, when it's first starting, that's what's really important.
And remember, too, after you have your child at home, once you've gotten clearance to come home and before you finalize your adoption, you're going to have post-placement visits, at least 2 post-placement visits with the social worker that maybe was the same social worker that did your home study initially.
Right.
Hopefully you'll be able to use the same person. You all already know each other. And that social worker can be a great support and lend tips, too.
Right, yeah. It's so funny. My social worker with our adoption with our son, we lived in Sacramento at the time, but we had gone to dinner with my mother-in-law, and we were sitting there, and we're all eating, and my son was in his, because it took 18 months to finalize his adoption. We had a tough adoption. That's one of the reasons I do adoption work. But it came out beautifully in the end. But he was in his high chair, and we were all having dinner, and he was throwing his food all over the floor, and all around him, surrounding him. It looked like some back kitchen area. And I remember getting up from them and shaking the food off of me and picking him up and getting the food off of him. I turned around, and there in the booth next to us was his social worker. I thought, oh my gosh, she is never going to let us adopt this child, and I was just mortified that she saw everything, what's going on. But everything was fine. He was just being himself. And but you get real nervous during that period of time when the social worker comes. Be yourself and just make sure it's a safe environment. This is another thing too. When you have pets, get your pets used to being around kids early on. Very important. I have a little white miniature schnauzer that doesn't really like little kids, and he'll just nip at them enough to get them to cry. Well, I've got to keep that little miniature schnauzer away from the grandchildren. I've got another dog that's just lovable, big lab, and he has a big tail, and he'll just knock the kids over. So, you've got to get the kids used to that too. So, you want to make sure your animals are kid-friendly and your house is kid-friendly. I had a family that was trying to adopt, and there ended up being other issues going on. They ended up not adopting, going through the process, because I went to their house to visit them, and they had open kitty litter boxes on the floor. I said, this is not going to cut it with a baby. You're not going to get through your home study with this. And they insisted they were going to keep the cats that way, and I said, there are things you could make, but I don't want a baby crawling across the kitty litter. And it came to be other things in there, but that's stuff you want to think of too, is that if you're a baby, get down on your hands and knees and see what they're going to be able to see and touch, and keep your home, baby friendly and safe for them too. And social workers are going to look for that too, but they're not looking for a white glove treatment type thing.
Right, but certainly exposed kitty litter in the living areas, that's a no-no, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and really important too. And watch also for the doggy doors. Kids can crawl out of doggy doors. If you have a pool, it should be also enclosed. Ask about that too. If you have guns, they should be locked up, because kids get curious about that. These are all things that people don't think about, but sometimes social workers will mention that, and you don't want to have anything that you feel horrible about later on. So think about those ahead of time, how you want to take care of that.
Mardie, we have a question here, and I think we've kind of danced around it tonight, but this is, I think is a really good question to park on right now. What are some telltale signs that the infant is either not or is bonding or connecting well? What would you look for, as far as maybe if you were visiting another family and you're thinking, gosh, this infant just seems stressed out, or like they're not quite sure who they go to, versus an infant that seems well bonded?
I think it depends on the situation. Also, it depends if the baby has had exposure to chemicals, exposure to alcohol or drugs also. Sometimes the babies are also going to have some withdrawal from that. I have to share with you, don't be fearful of that. I just received this wonderful letter from a family that adopted. They sent me this letter 18 years ago. They sent me a picture of them with this little baby on that I was holding in my office at the time, and they sent me his graduation pictures. And I'll tell you what, she said he is a star football player, track star. He was the what's it, Heather, homecoming king, and he wants to be an architect. He's got great grades. She is not bad for a crack baby that started out on crack. And absolutely gorgeous kid. And it gives me goosebumps, makes me want to cry, because he had another opportunity in life, but his parents spent the time bonding and doing the things they needed to do to make his life completely different than it would have been in his biological family's life. And he had that. They understood that part. So getting back to your question on this too, Libby, specifically the bonding then for infants from 0 to 4 months. Are you talking about that too then, or?
Yeah, well, is it really more, I would say, my intuition would say that it's going to vary family to family. Some infants don't, like I have a niece. She's not super cuddly. She likes to be held, but she's not super cuddly, versus I have a very, very close friend of mine, and her babies all love to be swaddled and held as tight as they can be to you.
Yeah, they're all different personalities.
So I think it's probably going to be parent to parent. If you are practicing healthy bonding habits with your family, then there may not be a sign to look for,
That may not be a sign of bonding either. my two children are completely different. On one wanted to be cuddled more than the other, and my son, after a while, would just wiggle out of my arms, and he just wanted to run free. And the 5 Love Languages of Children is an excellent book. Gary Smalley has that book, and I would definitely recommend that to anybody. I start reading that right away. You're going to have kids that are more of a cuddly, like you said, and it doesn't matter if it's a male or a female. It could be completely opposite. You may have a son that just loves to be cuddled and touched, and the love languages and others that have other love languages that you can do. So don't try to put your child into a specific box and say, you know, I have one child like this, and so I must not have bonded properly with this child. But the signs you could look for, again, for bonding on that is, you know, and again, don't be afraid to ask for help on that time, is that they don't have eye contact. And sometimes that can be signs of something else. But holding their hands, and sometimes kids get older, they don't want to hold their hands, they want to get more independent. But bonding at the very beginning, I think, is when the baby doesn't have good eye contact with you. You're cuddling with the baby, they turn their head. Again, that's why you want to start really, really early if possible. And even if the birth mother, like in my situation, kept the baby for 5 weeks, the bonding, I was able to pick up that bonding right away and move right into that with the baby, which I thought was really important. And so don't feel like, oh my gosh, I've missed a month, 2 months, or even a year of the baby's time and I can't bond, because you can.
Yeah, I think it might be case by case too, because if you adopt an older child and you know that that child is coming from a history that may need some extra maybe therapy or some extra practice to help that child bond and stabilize,
Yeah.
that again too, I know I worked with, what comes to mind is a family I worked with. They actually adopted a sibling group of 3 kids under 2, so it was 2, 1, and 7 months old. And the
Yeah.
2-year-old was pretty stable. She was more aware of the change when it went from birth mother to adoptive family. And so what the adoptive family did with her, they actually had a what to expect, a couple of the different what to expect series that they brought with them with some tips for baby and all that stuff. And the little 2-year-old girl found a picture of a pregnant mommy, and she just went in the corner with the book and that page, and she just petted the page. And I remember the adoptive mom telling me, I just let her have her time with that and to have her memory. And then I talked to her about it and hugged her and loved on her. But then the 7-month-old, you know, he had an easier time transitioning. But the 1-year-old is one that they didn't notice issues until they'd settled in a little bit more at home. And in those post-placement visits with the home study provider, they actually learned that he'd been a little neglected because this very young mom had been juggling 3 kids in diapers. And so the older little girl was probably a little more independent, and then the baby needed more help because he's a baby. And so this 1-year-old kind of got dropped in the middle. He actually needed some counseling where the other 2 children did not. So your home study provider can kind of step in to give some tips for your specific adoption too.
They do sand therapy, which is really great to do that. The other thing too is that even if you have a wiggly little child that's not, you feel like not bonding, take them to the park and swing with them. You have swinging time with them. Take any opportunity you can to hold their hand, to give them something, hand-to-hand type thing. Let them help out so they feel needed, again, and wanted and important, and praise them. Really important. But yes, and when you're doing a sibling group, it's going to be a little harder. That's what you want to be able to help. You know, one question came in here about, don't go out to dinner for 3 months. No, go out to dinner and you have to stay home. First 3 months.
Not for 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's quite in. And what'll happen is, you get to a point where you want to have someone to watch the baby while you go out and have a date night out. But you guys will talk about nothing but the baby usually, and can't wait to get back home. We did take the everywhere we went. I used to take the baby to the theater too, and we talk about adoptive breastfeeding. With my son, I did adoptive breastfeeding, and I can give you some information if you want to share the website. We're just finishing up the book right now and kit on adoptive breastfeeding, and I was very successful with that. I think it's a guide to adoptivebreastfeeding.com. Is that the site?
Yeah, I'm going to copy it here and then we'll announce it, and then I also want to share the special offer you brought for us tonight too. So
yeah. Yeah, but I thought that was really important. So the bonding also helped with breastfeeding my son, and I would just wear the little mechanism under my sweater or my blouse, and it does a little tube. It's like a flask you have between your breasts, and you have like a little necklace that holds onto it, and then the tube goes to your nipple. The baby suckles on the nipple on the tube and gets the formula, and has the bonding going on right there. And I never did produce milk with my son. I later on did with my daughter, and I also, when I lost some pregnancies, my milk had started coming in. But with my son, I used the formula. His birth mother had breastfed him for 5 weeks, so I went from 0 to 100 miles an hour on that one. That was really tough because he was a fierce little eater, and but I did it for bonding because I really wanted to catch up with those 5 weeks that I felt I had lost. And I wanted to make sure I had lots of skin-to-skin contact with him and contact during that period of time. So when you are feeding the baby, whether it's going to be adopted breastfeeding or through the bottle, make sure you have plenty of eye contact too. And but I would take the baby to the theater even, and we would go to the theater and breastfeed that way, and just spend time with them. And they got used to the sound and everything. It was fine. I did go to a bunch of scary movies, but I just wanted to spend as much time as possibly could with the children, and I waited a long time to be parents, and I wanted to take in every ounce of this opportunity to be parents because I had waited so many years for that.
Well, Mardie,
and remember what we're talking about.
Oh, sorry, Kim.
These are seasons. These are very brief seasons. Like the newborn phase is a matter of weeks when you're doing those early stages of bonding where you really don't want other people to hold the baby longer than 5. We're not talking about now it's a year. It's a 6-month-old that you've already bonded with that nobody can hold.
Yeah, it's at the very beginning. You talked about that.
Yeah. Sometimes when we are transitioning into parenthood, the advice and the things we're expecting to encounter, it seems like those are going to last forever. But these are just small windows of time that you get to go through as your rite of passage as new parents.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, that period of time, I always wanted to know that I gave my very best to my child, and I didn't substitute it. I think it's important to be sure that you feel that I've done the very best you possibly can. None of us are perfect, and I'm a perfectionist. And part of that has really served me well, and other parts have really cursed me, poorly. And so what happens is you have to just do the best you possibly can and realize it. I remember walking in, I used to, be nicely dressed and everything, and I did go into the grocery store to buy diapers one time, and I looked up and there was a mirror behind the checker, and I looked in the mirror and I thought, who is that woman? And I had spit up on my left shoulder, I had something on my right shoulder, my hair was a mess, and I thought, oh my gosh. But I had been so busy parenting, I forgot to look in the mirror. So you do want to look in the mirror and take care of yourself too. But it was just a moment of time when everything was happening. It was pretty. I'm revealing myself to you there. But you want to take time for yourself and make sure you are doing that part, but also the bonding with the baby. There was another question that came in just recently. Let's see here. Questions you have there?
Can I make a comment real quick, and I'll reveal something about myself too? Is that when you are breastfeeding, whether you're using a mechanism or you've been able to produce milk, it can be painful at first, and that also is a short period of time that is a transition, and then after your skin adapts and maybe you use some special something that you rub on yourself, it can help.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you can condition yourself, and we have it in the kit also, and you can use a washcloth, a rough washcloth, and roughen up, basically your nipples, get yourself going on that. So they used to do that. They've got some new things they're doing now that are different, but everyone's a little bit different on that. But planning ahead of time is really good, and understanding that. That's why the kit's so nice, because you can read about all this ahead of time and find out.
Well, and Mardie, I'm glad you're bringing this up. I wanted to share a couple. I don't have them in front of me, but a couple emails that came in after your last webinar where you shared tips for great adoptive parenting, and we had touched on bonding and getting into that. There were a lot of questions and interest after that webinar, specifically around adoptive breastfeeding. And a couple of the emails that we got, and I love that you have brought this kit to light, because two women in particular, I remember after you spoke briefly about it last time, just shared with us how they'd only ever had negative feedback when it came to the desire to breastfeed the child they adopt. And they were so encouraged and refreshed to know that there are people out there that are interested in it like them, that there's people out there who've actually tried it. And so, you know.
And I had some negative stuff too. I mean, we had him as right at Thanksgiving, just newly. I just started this, and the grandmother, my husband's grandmother, was a nurse, and she was older, and she said, "You're going to get cancer. What are you doing?" And she scared the death out of me, you know, because I wanted to bond with my son, but that was kind of shocking because I didn't have anybody to go to. I had just been reading about that, and it was very new back then. But I knew I wanted to bond with my son. It was really important for me because, you know, I felt it was important, and I wanted to experience that, a baby at my breast and holding him and that skin on skin. I think it was very important, and I think it helps us to this day with the bonding. I think with bonding with your children when you have that, they just, where they're not just left with a bottle propped up. And Dad can do this too. Dad can go ahead and have time to feed with the baby at the bottle, with the formula, and they actually have breastfeeding milk banks available. They're a little expensive, and they're only in the bigger cities too, but there's some great formulas out there you can use, so I hope that helps too. You know, someone asked a question here about visiting with birth moms for the first 6 months of adoption. Is it better to wait until later? It won't. I don't think it'll confuse the baby in the bonding time, because you're going to have that time where the baby's with you and used to you, and 24 hours a day with that baby, and birth mom's going to be there for just short a period of time. I don't think it's going to be a concern. And you also want to honor whatever, you know, agreement you had with the birth mom that you've made with her, that you would go ahead and stay in contact or share letters and photographs. One tip I always recommend to people is when you send photographs to the birth mom, send some photographs of you holding the baby, you're together happy, so you can see the baby happy, because a lot of times people send pictures of just the baby by itself, and this poor little baby's leaning over there, kind of sad looking, all by itself, and they don't realize that they're surrounded by love. And it really sometimes will cause a birth mom to feel guilty that, oh my gosh, there's my poor baby by itself, you know, what I do, where it's better to have the baby shown with joy around them and the family, or if there's other siblings or the relatives around them too, so they can get an idea that I have made a good decision and I'm happy with my adoption choice in this family.
Even little video clips, because your baby's going to come to a stage where they laugh, and you'll know exactly how to make them laugh. And so you could do a little video clip of that, so they get to hear the baby's laugh too.
Well, and
she's open to hearing videos.
They didn't hear the answer to the question as to when it's okay to start going out with the baby. I would say, you know, after a few weeks to a month or so, I just don't like to go out with germs, and I know kids have to pick up germs and stuff, but at the very beginning, I like to spend that time home bonding with the baby, and it just, and then going out with the baby after a few months I think is fine, or a month period of time, depends on where you go.
Of course, if you're adopting out of state, you're going to be eating out some for a little bit, you know. And it's just, I think it would be more about just keeping it low key, but also, again, Marty, what I keep hearing in your tips is probably what a lot of parents do, whether they're touched by adoption or not, which is being aware that people are very tempted to want to touch babies, get all in their face, and to just really know that you get a say over who touches your baby. So if your baby is brand new and you're out of state waiting to get clearance to go home, and you decide, you know, we're tired of eating in the hotel room, let's go out for a real meal, put on real shoes and pants, and that you just know, I'm going to tell a waitress, like, don't get in my baby's face. Keep a blanket over the car seat. You know.
Well, what happens is I recommend people have hand sanitizer at home. They walk in the door, either go wash their hands with warm water, and or use a hand sanitizer before they hold the baby. Because especially little kids, they want to come over and they slobber all over them and stuff like that. And you know, I let my kids play in dirt, and they got dirty and everything else, and they, you know, ran around. The dog would lick them and stuff like that. It's totally different. But when you're talking about a newborn at the very beginning and you're trying to do the bonding and you want them to be healthy, and they're still developing in so many areas, you want to be as safe as possible. And I just think it's important to think about that too. And I'm my little mommy, you know, mother hen wings came out in Italian sometimes too, just saying, I'm sorry, but I'm the mom now, and this is it. And it felt real weird at the very beginning to say I'm the mom, but it felt also very good too to say that. And I think that families will understand that also, and they'll say, oh, wait till your fourth child, you won't worry about it all. Well, I'm with my first child right now,
You
and
know,
this is how I feel too.
I was going to add too, when you were talking about birth mothers and what they want to see, that you may also find, as I was told by one of Lifetime's adoptive families very recently, they adopted 3 months ago, and we got to visit with them in person, meet little baby, and they actually said it was very, very important to the whole birth family, not just birth mom, but to birth father and to some birth grandparents that were there, aunts, uncles, people related. They loved seeing adoptive family loving on and cozying up with baby, feeding baby, because to them that said, okay, they're attaching, they really want this child. My child is safe
They
with them.
did something, they did it right, yeah.
Yes, yes.
And that's what birth moms want to know. They want confirmation that they made the right choice and this baby's happy and that they've made you happy and the baby's going to be well cared for and they can go on with life too. And I think that's one of the things that you can share with. And, you know, I think a lot of times they worry the birth mom's going to be, you know, feel bad and things like that. She may have moments of sadness, but I've had birth moms, I've been in labor rooms where they hopped up and zipped up their little jeans and said, you're the new mom, I'm out of here. And we're thrilled to death. I've had other ones that have taken some time. I've been at hospitals before where, you know, it took hours for a birth mom to finally let go of the baby and say, now I'm ready. She spent that, because you can't say goodbye to a baby till you say hello. And, you know, we can get into a whole other webinar about the hospital experience, which I think is extremely important. And the more knowledge, I applaud everyone on the call tonight, the more knowledge you have about adoption, it's going to save you time, it's going to save you grief, it's going to save you money, you're going to have a better adoption experience. And that's what you're going to get. Educate yourself in these areas. I tell people, I was talking about this today, is that you would never just say, go on vacation and say, I'm going to go to this country I've never heard about, I can barely pronounce the name of it, without checking it out, understanding their food, their culture, how to get there, where you're going to stay, and get information about it. And people would normally have no idea adoption when they first start out. When I first started wanting to adopt, all I wanted to do is have someone drop a baby off on a basket on my doorstep and ring the doorbell. I would go out and swoop that baby and swirl around and start parenthood. Well, as I started reading and realizing this baby has, you know, a history, has a biological family, has needs, and I need to embrace that and realize that, yes, I'm the mommy, and but this child also has a biological roots too, and I want to respect that also, because if it weren't for birth parents, we wouldn't be mommies and daddies, and we need to remember that too and honor that. And that gets back into when I tell a child you're adopted, and I brought this up almost every webinar, is as soon as we brought our son home, I got his little cheek and I said, I am so glad we were able to adopt you. And adoption was always in our vocabulary, so there was never a day where we had to sit him down at age 12 or 9 or 6 or whatever it was and talk about adoption. It was always part of it. And there are some great adoption books out for children, and I recommend you get as many of those as possible and read them. And you'll find that maybe 1 or 2 become your children's favorite books, and they want to read them over and over again. It's very healthy.
Mardie, I wanted to bring up, just in case people didn't see the little notes we're typing here to share with the online audience, but you have brought with you tonight an offer for free priority shipping if you enter the code BONDING, all capital letters, at guidetoadoptivebreastfeeding.com, and you can get this kit, and it's actually on special right now, at a reduced price. Introductory price here, but you can also get free shipping, so that's a really great savings. And if you're interested in that, go check it out. Again, the website is guidetoadoptivebreastfeeding.com, and we'll try and send out some follow-up emails in case any of you are scrambling to make a note of that.
Yeah.
But it is a popular topic these days, and it's great that more and more people are actually talking about it, which I think is comforting to adoptive parents, so they're not feeling so isolated in their experience.
And you can breastfeed. I took my my little milk flask, I guess you'd call it. Do they have different names for it? But I would wear it underneath me, and because it stays warm against your skin. I would take it to church, and I'd go into the nursery, and I'd feed my baby in there. They never knew I wasn't breastfeeding from my own breast. So, you can go any place you want with that, and then you just have how to drape over it. So I think it's good. The one thing I want to bring up also is I want to talk about our adoption prayer bracelet, because this is something that helped me remind me why I was trying to adopt, and a lot of families have found comfort in this too. It's adoptionprayerbracelet.com. If you're interested in something like that, it has a little scripture on it and a little heart, and they come in different colors. And it was a bracelet that you can wear that will remind you every day to pray for your birth mother, your child-to-be, and other people to also pray for you during this time, because I believe in the power of prayer, and I think that is important. And those reminders were really helpful for myself and also for others too. So that's just something that we need to know about
Absolutely.
too.
Well,
I hope this has helped.
I think it has. The questions and the comments have been very favorable. And I was going to add too that if you would also like free shipping on any purchase of one of those bracelets. The really cool thing I wanted to add to that, Mardie, was that those bracelets raise money to help birth moms. So it's not only encouraging for the people who buy them to remember to keep praying, hold on to that dream like you went through, that you needed that reminder of God's not saying I'm not meant to be a mom. God's just saying it's not time yet.
That baby could be still percolating, and you want the right child for you, and you don't want to feel like you're trying to push a round peg into a square hole. You want the right child for you, and that might just take a little bit longer, and maybe there's some other things you're still learning along the way. But you're in the right direction. Listen to the webinars. Parenting through adoption is miraculous. It can have its challenges along the way. Remember, never stop learning and bonding, and keep your commitment to stay in touch with your birth parents. Adoptive parents have a great capacity for love, as they love their child, not of their bodies, but of their hearts. And supporting them as we can is vital for positive outcomes in adoption. And I want to be able to hear from everyone on the call tonight. I want to see pictures now, and I want to see them in 18 years of these little kids and what their wonderful bonding did for them, that they have taken this information and applied it to their life, and these children will make a huge lifetime difference in these kids' lives. And I applaud again the people on the call tonight, because they're taking the time to be the best parents they possibly can, and I know that God loves that too.
Well, if you, again, if you're listening and you want to take up the free shipping offer, just use the code BONDING, but it's all capital letters, and that's the same code for either a bracelet or the breastfeeding kit. And again, we'll follow up so you don't have to memorize all of this stuff. But if you're listening to this later and maybe you can't find that email with the information, you can always reach out to Lifetime and ask your coordinator, or just call and speak with someone about the adoptive breastfeeding kit or the adoption prayer bracelet.
The 800 number. What's the 800?
It's one. The best way to call us is 1-800-923-6784. And you know what, I'm loving the comments coming in just saying, I didn't even know this was possible. I thought this was part of my dream I had to give up. And that's really, I know, your heart for bringing this topic to light tonight, just encouraging people to remember that, like you just said, adoptive parenting doesn't have to be that different from the dream you may have had as a little child of bringing a child home through your womb. You're still going to be a parent. Your day-to-day. I love the last tip you put on that handout we offered tonight. Just says, relax and enjoy it.
And it's interesting, once you do this and you got it all together, people ask me now, I forget when I talk about my son, I forget about, when I had you. And he'll look at me, like we talk about when you gave birth to him, when I had you, because he's more like me than my daughter that's biological. I have a daughter that's biological, miracle baby. But my son is more like me with adoption. We think the same. We've got so much similarities. It's unbelievable. And but I think a lot of there's nature and there's nurture, and I think a lot of it we're talking about tonight is the nurturing part too, and then God will take care of the nature part.
That's precious. Well, thank you, Mardie. I know we ran over tonight, but if I know you probably would want to cover any questions, so if anyone has one last thought on their mind, now's the time to type it in to take advantage of Mardie's experience and her heart tonight. I think what's great, and what I hope that all of you are hearing in tonight's webinar, is that adoption isn't just about getting there. Mardie, you actually said something that sort of stuck with me, and I think it stuck with a lot of the people who heard your webinar last month. And you said at the very beginning, a lot of people think that the adoption is the end, that's the end milestone, but it's really just the beginning.
It's the beginning. It's actually the beginning and starting. And we think that just the adoption process, but you're just starting your journey, and it's a wonderful journey. And I recommend it. And what I said was, many adoptive parents, you bringing their baby home at the end of their journey of parenthood is really the first step to the journey.
Yeah.
Becoming lifetime parents through adoption. And you're changing from being professionals into maternal mindset. And just remember that it's okay. Be gracious with yourself. Take time for yourself. And be the best parent you can by caring for yourself and caring for your spouse too.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight and typed in these great comments and questions. And we're going to have to go back through these because there may be a whole other webinar just in some of the comments that we couldn't get to. But Mardie, thanks for joining us tonight. And again, if you want more information about any of the topics that we talked tonight, or if you want to learn more about how Lifetime could help you reach your adoption dream, call us at 1-800-923-6784. You can also go to lifetimeadoption.com. There's a ton of information there, and it even helps to learn about the birth mother side of things. So if you're on lifetimeadoption.com, don't hesitate to read some of the information that your child's birth mom is going to read too, to learn about you, to learn about adoption, and to take those first steps towards meeting you too. It helps to know that side as well. But we would love to help you with any answers. As Kim often likes to say, if you're not yet working with Lifetime, apply, help us get to know you and your adoption goals, and we would be happy at least to even just be a stepping stone along the path for you to reach the right solution for your family. So please stay in touch. Let us know any questions or feedback after tonight's webinar. We would love to know your comments, and we look forward to meeting with all of you again on our next webinar. So stay tuned to your email. And again, if you want to look at the items that Mardie brought up tonight, go to guidetoadoptivebreastfeeding.com. Or go to myadoptionprayer.com. That's the shortest website to get to the prayer bracelets that she mentioned. And you can check those out. And we just hope all of you will continue forward in good faith and doing what you can to reach that child that's on your heart to adopt, because you'll get there if you really follow through with that. So, Mardie, thank you. Is there anything you want to add before we close out?
I just want to encourage everybody to continue on, be really positive, and about this, and again, learn as much as you have. Come back for more webinars. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. I've got a lot of experience behind me. I'm willing to share that. I think it's important that we all leave a legacy and that we all share with each other, and it makes life a lot easier too. So thank you. God bless each one of you. Thanks again, gals. You did a great job.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great night. We'll talk with you soon. 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 With you soon.